At my 18th birthday party held right here in the cabin my grandparents left me, I quietly finalized the transfer of their entire multi-million-dollar estate into an irrevocable trust just to be safe. The party was in full swing, everyone raising glasses and laughing like everything was perfect. While they toasted to my future, I slipped away for a moment, pulled out my phone, and hit confirm on the digital signature that locked everything down: the cabin, the land, the accounts. My name is Autumn Henderson, and that one click made me the sole trustee. No turning back. I'd been preparing this for weeks with the lawyer my grandparents trusted, waiting only for the day I turned 18 to make it official. The doubts had been building for months, but I never said a word. The very next morning, as the mountain fog still hung thick in the valleys, I heard tires crunching gravel outside. A moving truck pulled up, followed by my parents and younger brother, all stepping out with big smiles and a thick stack of papers in hand. "We've got it all sorted," my dad announced confidently. "The house belongs to us now." They started directing the movers like they already owned the place, telling me to pack my things by the end of the day. That's when they looked up at the wide porch and saw the man in the suit standing next to a sheriff's deputy, holding an official folder and waiting calmly. If you've ever dealt with family trying to claim what's yours or had to protect something important from the people closest to you, drop your story in the comments below. I read them all. And if this kind of boundary setting and toxic dynamics hits home, subscribe for more stories like this. You won't want to miss what happens next. When I was 14, everything changed with one letter that arrived in the mail. It was from a prestigious high school in Knoxville offering me a full scholarship based on my grades and test scores. One of those merit-based programs that cover tuition completely for top students from across Tennessee. I remember rushing home from school that day, clutching the envelope, my heart pounding with excitement. This was my ticket out, proof that hard work paid off despite everything. I burst through the door and showed it to my parents right away. My mother glanced at it briefly, offered a quick, "That's nice, honey," and then turned back to the phone call she was on. My father nodded, said something like, "Good job," but his eyes were already on the TV where highlights from Sawyer's latest football game were playing. Within minutes, the conversation shifted entirely. Sawyer had gotten into a fight at school that week. Nothing major, just a scuffle with another kid during recess that escalated into punches. He ended up suspended for a few days. Instead of punishment, the house revolved around him. My parents spent the entire week meeting with the principal, arguing that it was self-defense, hiring a private tutor to catch him up on missed work, and even throwing a small gathering with his teammates to cheer him up. They talked about how unfair the suspension was, how the other kid provoked it, and how Sawyer needed support to get through this tough time. I sat there during dinner listening to it all. My scholarship letter forgotten on the counter. No one organized anything for me, no family dinner to celebrate. I ended up framing the acceptance letter myself and hanging it in my room where it stayed as a quiet reminder that achievements like mine were expected, not celebrated. That moment hit hard. I realized my successes were just background noise, while Sawyer's mistakes became the main event demanding everyone's attention. The second blow came the following year when Sawyer was 15. He was out riding his bike around the neighborhood, one of those expensive models my parents had bought him after a good season, and he clipped a neighbor's parked car while showing off to friends. The damage wasn't huge, a scratched fender and dented door, but it could have cost a few thousand to fix properly. I expected consequences. After all, when I was younger and accidentally knocked over an old family vase while cleaning one my mother cherished from her own childhood, I got grounded for weeks and a long lecture about responsibility. But with Sawyer, it was different. My parents immediately drove over to the neighbor's house, apologized profusely, and wrote a check on the spot to cover repairs. Then, without hesitation, they took him to the bike shop and upgraded him to an even better model, saying he deserved something reliable after the scare. They framed it as teaching him a lesson in making things right. But to me, it felt like rewarding recklessness. Sawyer came home grinning, showing off the new bike while my father clapped him on the back and said, "Boys will be boys." No grounding, no loss of privileges, just more support. That incident crystallized everything. I wasn't just overlooked. I was held to a higher standard, expected to be perfect and independent, while Sawyer's flaws were excused, cushioned, and even turned into opportunities for more. It forced me into a role I never asked for, the responsible one, who handled her own disappointments, who didn't cause waves, who fixed things quietly because asking for help or fairness never led anywhere. These weren't isolated moments. They shaped how I moved through the world from then on. I stopped sharing my wins, buried the hurt deeper, and started relying only on myself. The unfairness didn't make me bitter towards Sawyer exactly. He was just a kid benefiting from the system our parents built. But it did make me question what family really meant when support flowed only one way. Looking back, those two events were the turning point. They taught me early that expecting equity at home was futile, and that if I wanted security or recognition, I'd have to create it outside those walls. The cabin in the Smoky Mountains became my true refuge growing up. Those weekend trips from Knoxville, about 90 minutes on curving highways through the foothills, always felt like crossing into another life. The city noise faded, replaced by wind in the pines and the crunch of gravel under tires as we pulled up the long drive. Many afternoons revolved around projects with my grandfather, Lloyd Henderson. He'd spot issues around the property that needed attention, like sections of the wide porch roof sagging from years of snow load and rain. We'd gather tools from his well-organized shed, climb the extension ladder together, and replace rotten boards or patch shingles. He moved slower as time passed, but never lost his precision, showing me how to cut angles clean and seal seams properly against the mountain weather. Working side by side, sweat mixing with sawdust, he'd share practical wisdom. Not lectures, just observations about doing things right the first time to avoid bigger problems later. His steady nod when a repair held firm gave me a sense of accomplishment deeper than any report card ever could. Firewood preparation filled other days. Grandfather ran the chainsaw to buck fallen trees into rounds. Then we'd set up the splitting block in the clearing behind the cabin. He'd demonstrate the swing weight shifting forward maul head, meeting the grain at just the right spot for a clean break. I'd take turns, muscles burning after a few hours, stacking the split pieces neatly under the overhang to season. Breaks meant cold water from the hand pump and quiet talk about the forest, how certain trees grew stronger in poor soil, or memories of storms that downed whole ridges. Those sessions built strength in me beyond the physical, teaching resilience through repetition and care. Evenings brought a shift indoors with my grandmother, Ruby Henderson. Her kitchen was the heart of the place, filled with the aroma of simmering pots on the wood stove. She'd pull out ingredients for her signature venison stew meat, from hunts grandfather still managed when health allowed, root vegetables from the garden plot she'd tended for decades. I'd chop onions while she seared chunks in lard, tears streaming from the fumes as we laughed about it. Then came the layering carrots, potatoes, herbs tied in cheesecloth for easy removal. The pot bubbled slowly, flavors deepening over hours, filling the cabin with warmth that chased away any chill. We'd eat at the scarred oak table bowls, steaming bread baked fresh that morning, sopping up the rich broth. Grandmother's stories flowed then about meeting grandfather during wartime, building this home board by board on weekends away from factory jobs. Her gentle questions about my life drew out things I held back at home, making me feel truly heard. As their health declined, my role grew. Doctor visits in nearby towns meant longer stays helping with daily tasks that became harder, carrying groceries up the steep path. Reading mail aloud when eyesight failed, sitting vigil during hospital stays. They expressed gratitude in small ways. A hand squeeze, an extra slice of pie, never demanding, but clearly appreciating the presence. One conversation altered everything. Grandfather sat in his worn armchair beside the stone fireplace one fall night, the flames low and steady. Grandmother had retired early, leaving us in comfortable silence until he spoke up. "I've seen how your father manages finances," he said plainly, eyes on the fire. "And Victor, too, chasing schemes that don't pan out, overextending on credit for things that depreciate fast." He paused, letting the crackle fill the gap. "Your grandmother and I talked it through many times. That's why the cabin, the land here, everything we've saved, it's yours. We know you'll steward it responsibly, preserve what matters instead of squandering." Then came the line that echoed long after. "Family isn't always about who deserves what they're given. Some aren't meant to hold on to certain things." It wasn't accusatory, just honest assessment from a man who'd lived frugally and wisely. Those words lodged in me, sparking questions about comments I'd overheard from my father regarding property values or potential sales. Doubt took root quietly that night, reshaping how I viewed casual family mentions of the place. Their declines accelerated afterward. Grandmother slipped on ice one winter, complications setting in quickly despite treatment. Grandfather followed soon, heart giving out as if unwilling to continue alone. The service was intimate, held at a small church overlooking the ridges they cherished. Attendees, mostly old neighbors and distant relatives, sharing memories of shared meals or help during floods. When the attorney read the will formally in a quiet office afterward, confirming the full transfer to me, the cabin structure forested acres, modest but secure investments accumulated over lifetimes. The reality sank in. This wasn't mere inheritance. It represented deliberate choices, trust placed in my hands alone. Standing outside later mountains shrouded in mist, the burden felt immense, honoring their faith by protecting what they had built against any threats known or unforeseen. Word spread quickly through local news and online forums about potential new tourism developments in the Smoky Mountains area. Talk of expanded lodging, better access roads, and more attractions to handle the millions pouring into Sevier County each year. Property values in nearby spots like Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge had been climbing steadily, with reports of land selling faster and at higher prices than before. The buzz reached our family too, shifting how they talked about the cabin. Visits from Knoxville, roughly an hour's drive on those winding routes, became more frequent. My parents started showing up unannounced on weekends, claiming they wanted to check on things or clear out leftover items from the grandparents' storage. Victor arrived most often. He'd been struggling since his small construction business folded a couple of years back, leaving him with unpaid loans and credit card debt that kept piling up. He'd park his truck in the clearing, walk the property lines with a measuring tape, muttering about acreage and views. Or one afternoon, he sat on the porch steps with a notebook sketching rough ideas. "This spot has serious potential," he said, gesturing toward the forested slope. "With all the new projects they're planning nearby, land like this could fetch a fortune if sold at the right time." He suggested listing it soon, arguing the market wouldn't stay hot forever. "Think about the family," he added. "Splitting proceeds would give everyone a boost, cover debt, set up savings, maybe help Sawyer with college down the line." My father agreed during his next drop-by, pointing out maintenance costs, adding up roof repairs, property taxes on the expanded acres. "It's a big responsibility for one person," he noted, echoing Victor's line about sharing the burden financially. Mother chimed in over coffee in the kitchen, mentioning how nice it would be to have funds for home updates in Knoxville or a family vacation they'd postponed. She framed it as practical, not greedy, but the focus stayed on money flowing out if kept versus coming in if liquidated. Sawyer got excited, imagining a new truck or gear for his football team, asking directly if selling meant he could upgrade his ride sooner. Their comments layered on visit after visit, always circling back to timing the sale perfectly amid rising demand from tourists and developers. I listened without pushing back, Noticing how conversations avoided memories of the place and jumped straight to appraisals or realtor contacts, Victor claimed to know. Care morphed into calculation, concern into convenience. Victor's pressure intensified. He'd text midweek about opportunities slipping away or forward articles on regional growth. Once he brought printouts of comparable sales, highlighting numbers far above what the land had been worth when my grandparents bought it decades ago. My parents backed him fully, by then discussing division of proceeds openly in front of me, assuming agreement. Sawyer joined in, dreaming aloud about using his share for custom wheels, or a down payment on something flashy once he turned driving age. The shift crystallized during one group outing, to walk the boundary markers. Victor paced off sections estimating values per acre based on recent comps he'd researched. Father nodded along, calculating totals in his head, while Mother worried aloud about holding too long and missing peak prices. Sawyer trailed behind, kicking rocks, in already spending hypothetical cash on upgrades. No one asked how I felt about parting with the only spot that ever felt truly mine. That day removed any lingering doubt. Their interest wasn't in preserving legacy or honoring wishes. It centered purely on profit, on turning sentiment into statements. Suspicion hardened into certainty. They viewed the inheritance as communal resource, not individual gift. The change marked a clear break in my thinking from wary observation to firm recognition of calculated intent. Driving down from the cabin to Knoxville felt longer than the usual hour every curve in the highway, giving me more time to second-guess everything. I'd booked the appointment with Jonathan Rice weeks earlier, right after my birthday. But now that the day arrived, my stomach twisted with nerves. His office sat in a quiet downtown building away from the bustle grandfather had recommended him years ago for handling their affairs, praising his straightforward approach to estate matters. Jonathan greeted me calmly, gesturing to a chair across from his desk stacked with neat folders. We reviewed the documents he'd prepared in advance, the irrevocable trust structure funding schedules for the bank accounts and deed transfers for the cabin and surrounding acres. Everything waited only for my final signature, now that I had turned 18. He explained the protections again, how placing assets in this type of trust removed them from my personal estate, shielding against future claims while honoring my grandparents' intent. Tennessee law allowed it fully at my age. No guardianship needed. Then he leaned forward, voice steady but direct. "Sue, are you prepared for the fallout? This could mean confrontation, even losing ties with your family if they push back." The question hung heavy. Memories flooded in despite my efforts to stay focused. I thought about rare good times like the Christmas when Sawyer was little and we all decorated the tree in Knoxville together. My parents laughing as he hung ornaments too high. Or the road trip to the beach one summer, stopping for ice cream, feeling almost normal as a unit. Even smaller moments surfaced. Mother helping with a school project late one night. Father cheering at a recital I'd almost forgotten. Sawyer sharing headphones on a long drive. Both of us singing off-key to old songs. Those flashes made the choice ache. Protecting the inheritance meant drawing a line they might never forgive crossing. Oh, isolation loomed if they reacted badly. Holidays could turn empty. Phone calls ceased. The already thin connection snap entirely. Jonathan waited patiently while I stared at the papers. "It's not impulsive," he added gently. "You've thought this through, but it is permanent." I asked for details again, how distributions would work if I needed funds for maintenance, tax implications shifted immediately, options if circumstances changed dramatically. He answered each clearly, no pressure, either way. Doubt crested that afternoon. Driving back up the mountain fog rolling in early, I pulled over at an overlook and sat with the engine off. The quiet pressed in, mirroring the fear of silence from home if I followed through. What if they surprised me? What if the pressure was just worry, not greed? Losing whatever remained of family felt like grieving them prematurely. Sleep evaded me that night in the cabin, fire low in the hearth. I paced rooms my grandparents filled with life, touching familiar objects. A carved walking stick grandfather made grandmother's quilt on the sofa. Their trust in me weighed against the pull of blood ties. By dawn, clarity emerged, not as thunder, but quiet resolve. The recent visits calculations disguised as care. Victor's urgency all pointed one direction. Waiting risked everything they'd built slipping away through manipulation or forged claims. The decision crystallized safeguard their legacy, accept the pain of potential estrangement. Growth demanded it, even if lonely. Back in Jonathan's office the next morning, hand steadier than expected. I signed the final pages. Relief washed over immediately. Security locked in, mingled with sharp sorrow for bridges possibly burned. He shook my hand firmly. This took courage. Many hesitate forever. Leaving downtown Knoxville City, giving way to foothills, the mix settled empowerment from action grief over fractured bonds ahead. Maturity arrived not gently but necessarily forged in that irreversible choice. The family dinner invitation came as no surprise. They suggested gathering at the cabin itself easier for everyone, they claimed, since I was already there most weekends. I agreed without hesitation, curious to see how far the assumptions had gone. Preparations kept me busy that day, stocking the pantry with steaks and fresh produce from the nearby market in Townsend, setting the long oak table my grandparents had built decades ago. The stone fireplace crackled early, chasing away the evening chill as vehicles pulled up the gravel drive. Father arrived first with Mother carrying a bottle of wine and a store-bought pie. Victor came next, bringing his wife Angela, who rarely visited anymore since she'd made clear years ago she found the cabin too remote and outdated. Sawyer bounded in wearing his Letterman jacket, already talking about how hungry he was. The gathering felt staged somehow, too coordinated for a casual family meal. Everyone settled into the living room while I finished in the kitchen. Conversation floated through the doorway. Surface-level updates about neighbors and weather before someone mentioned property again. "We should really talk seriously tonight," Victor said louder now, making sure I heard. "About what makes sense for this place." Father agreed quickly. We've all been thinking about it independently. Time to make a collective decision." I brought out appetizers, cheese, and crackers arranged on grandmother's vintage platter and joined them by the fire. The tension underneath polite smiles was obvious. They were preparing for something rehearsed. Dinner started off normally enough. Passing dishes around, complimenting the food, making jokes about Sawyer's appetite as he piled seconds onto his plate. But halfway through the meal, Victor cleared his throat deliberately. The shift was immediate. Angela straightened in her chair. Mother set down her fork. Father took a long sip of wine before speaking. "Autumn, we need to discuss the future," he began, voice taking on that parental tone I recognized from childhood lectures. "This property is a family asset. Your grandparents were family, which means what they left behind belongs to all of us collectively." Victor nodded along. "Exactly. It's not just about you. We all have rights here, legal and moral. The smart move is selling while the market's strong and dividing everything fairly." Before I could respond, Victor pulled out his phone and started showing comps again. "I've been in contact with a developer who's very interested. They're offering well above market value because of the location. We're talking serious money enough to change everyone's situation." He quoted a figure that made Mother gasp audibly. Father leaned forward. "With your share, you could afford college without loans, set yourself up properly. We could all benefit." Sawyer chimed in, excited. "And I could finally get that truck I've been wanting. plus help with my expenses when I start at university." They all looked at me expectantly, as if this was a done deal just waiting for my rubber stamp. The presumption was stunning. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted. They'd already decided, already made plans, already spent money that wasn't theirs. We've actually scheduled a meeting with the developer next week, Victor continued, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed him bring in. Just need your signature on a few preliminary documents tonight. Power of attorney to handle the sale logistics, agreement to list the property, that sort of thing. He slid papers across the table toward me. Mother reached over and patted my hand. I know change is hard, honey, but this is what's best for the family. Your grandparents would want us all taken care of, not just one person bearing the burden alone. The manipulation was textbook reframing their greed as care, my resistance as selfishness. Father added weight to it. We've consulted with our own attorney. Inheritance laws in Tennessee are complex when it involves family property. You're young, just 18. Fighting this could get messy and expensive. Better to cooperate and keep things amicable. The veiled threat hung there, challenging me to object. I sat back and looked at each of them, Victor practically salivating over his calculations. Father wearing that stern expression meant to intimidate. Mother playing concerned and gentle. Angela checking her phone, probably already planning how to spend proceeds. Sawyer oblivious, just excited about material gains. This was my family. These were the people who should have protected and supported me, now scheming to take the one thing I had left from people who actually loved me unconditionally. So let me make sure I understand, I said slowly, keeping my voice even. You want me to sign away property that my grandparents specifically left to me alone. Property they worked their entire lives to build and maintain. Property they explicitly stated was mine to steward. And you want me to do this so everyone can cash out and buy trucks and home renovations. Victor frowned. You're oversimplifying. This is about family unity and making smart financial decisions together. Father jumped in. Your grandparents were old-fashioned. They didn't understand modern economics or family dynamics. Times change. Being flexible is mature. Flexible, I repeated. Interesting word choice. I stood up and walked to the fireplace, feeling their eyes follow me. The flames cast dancing shadows across the room, and I thought about all the evenings I'd sat here with Lloyd and Ruby, listening to their stories, learning their values. They knew exactly what they were doing when they left this place to me. They knew their own son and brother well enough to predict this exact scenario. I think there's something you all should know, I said, turning to face them. Before we go any further with this conversation. The room went quiet. Victor's confidence flickered slightly. What are you talking about? The inheritance, I continued. The cabin, the land, all of it. There's been a development you're not aware of. Mother leaned forward, concerned now. What kind of development? I let the pause stretch, watching them shift uncomfortably. At my birthday party last week, while you were all celebrating and making plans, I finalized something. Legal documentation that changes everything. Father's face darkened. What did you do? His tone carried accusation and rising anger. Victor stood up abruptly. You can't make legal decisions about family property without consulting us. Any contracts you signed can be challenged. Actually, I said calmly, I can. And they can't. I pulled out my phone and opened the PDF Jonathan had sent me that morning. The final registered documents complete with official seals and timestamps. The day I turned 18, I placed the entire estate into an irrevocable trust. As the sole trustee, I have complete control. The assets are no longer part of my personal estate and are protected from any claims, including family challenges. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floors. Victor's face went from confusion to comprehension to rage in seconds. You did what? He nearly shouted. Before this goes any further, I need to pause for something important. If you're listening to this story right now, I have a favor to ask. My mother told me I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube with content like this. She said stories about family betrayal and standing up for yourself don't matter to people, that nobody cares about these kinds of experiences. But I believe differently. I believe stories like mine and maybe yours too deserve to be heard. They matter because they're real, because they show that setting boundaries isn't selfish, and because they remind people they're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. So if this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to protect something precious from people who should have protected you, help me prove her wrong. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's build a community of people who understand that sometimes loving yourself means disappointing others. And let's show that these tales absolutely do matter. Now, back to what happened next, because things were about to get very intense. Father was on his feet now, face flushed red. That's illegal. You can't just take family property and lock it away. We'll fight this in court. We'll get it overturned. His voice rose with each sentence, so the carefully maintained facade of concerned parent crumbling into entitled rage. It's completely legal, I replied, still calm though my heart pounded. Tennessee law allows anyone 18 or older to create and manage trusts. Jonathan Rice, the same attorney who handled grandfather's estate, prepared everything. It's ironclad. Victor grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. Jonathan worked with us, too. He knows this is family property. He wouldn't help you steal from your own relatives. The word steal hung in the air, revealing exactly how he truly saw the situation. Jonathan worked for my grandparents, I corrected, and he followed their wishes, which were explicitly documented in their will. Everything to me, nothing to anyone else. They made that choice deliberately. I let that sink in. He explained that they came to him years ago, concerned about exactly this scenario. They wanted their legacy protected, not liquidated for short-term gains. Mother's approach shifted, trying a different tactic. Her voice went soft, wounded. Autumn, honey, why would you do this behind our backs? We're your family. We could have discussed this together, worked something out that made everyone happy. The guilt trip was predictable, trying to make my protection feel like betrayal. Like you discussed your plans with me? I countered. You scheduled meetings with developers without my knowledge, brought contracts tonight expecting me to just sign, made decisions about my property without once asking what I wanted. That's not discussion. That's ambush. Sawyer looked genuinely confused, less angry than the others. But it's not fair that you get everything. Grandpa Lloyd and Grandma Ruby were my grandparents too. I spent time here. I should get something. At least his hurt seemed more real than the manufactured outrage from the adults. I softened slightly when I looked at him. You're right, Sawyer. They were your grandparents. But they also knew you, knew all of us. They watched how money got spent in this family. They saw priorities. They made a choice based on who they trusted to keep this place standing instead of cashing it in. That landed hard. Sawyer looked down, unable to argue. Victor wasn't done, though. He shifted tactics, going for intimidation. You're making a huge mistake. You're 18 years old, barely an adult. You have no idea how to manage property, handle taxes, deal with maintenance issues. This place will drain you dry within a year, and then you'll come begging for help. Help we won't give because you burned this bridge tonight. I've been managing this place for the past 2 years while Grandpa's health declined, I shot back. I know every inch of this property, every repair needed, every seasonal issue. I've handled contractors, paid bills, maintained records. What I don't know, I'll learn same way they did. Angela finally spoke up, her voice dripping with disdain. This is exactly why I told you this family is dysfunctional, Victor. Ungrateful children who think they're entitled to everything while hardworking adults get nothing. She glared at me. Your uncle has debt because he was trying to build something, take risks, create opportunities. And this is how you repay family loyalty? Loyalty. The word came out harder than I intended. Where was the loyalty when my scholarship got ignored? When every achievement I earned was treated as expected while Sawyer's every misstep got rewarded? When I spent weekends here helping while you, I looked at Angela, complained it was too boring to visit. The accumulated resentment of years poured out. You want to talk about loyalty? My grandparents showed me loyalty. They saw me, really saw me, when my own parents couldn't look past their golden child. Don't you dare! Father stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Don't you dare make this about Sawyer. We treated you both fairly. If you felt overlooked, that's your perception, your issue. We provided for you. I gave you everything you needed. Everything except attention, except equity, except acknowledgement. My voice stayed level despite the emotion. But that's done. That's past. What matters now is that I'm protecting something precious from being destroyed for profit. Mother tried once more, tears forming now. You're tearing this family apart. Is that what you want? To be alone? To lose all of us over money and property? The emotional manipulation was her signature move. I'm not tearing anything apart, I said firmly. I'm maintaining boundaries. If choosing to honor my grandparents' wishes means losing people who only valued me for what I owned, then maybe those connections were already broken. The truth of that statement settled over me, heavy but clarifying. Victor made one last attempt at leverage. Fine, keep your cabin. But you'll need to buy out our shares. The estate may have been left to you, but we have legitimate claims based on family inheritance laws. We'll get appraisals, file legal challenges, make this as difficult and expensive as possible. Can you afford lawyers, court costs, years of legal battles? Actually, I pulled up another document on my phone. There are no shares to buy out. The trust structure means there's no estate to challenge. And before you threaten legal action, you should know Jonathan documented everything: your visits, your pressure tactics, the unsigned contracts you brought tonight. Pattern of coercion. If you file frivolous lawsuits, we'll countersue for harassment and attempted fraud. I'd learned more than carpentry and cooking from my grandparents. They'd taught me about protecting what matters. Well, the room fell silent again, but this time it was different. The anger remained, but defeat crept in around the edges. Victor and Father exchanged looks, calculating whether pushing further was worth it. Mother wiped her eyes, probably realizing guilt wouldn't work anymore. Angela gathered her purse, clearly done with the whole situation. Sawyer just looked lost, caught between the adult power plays he didn't fully understand. So that's it then, Father said finally, voice cold and flat. You've chosen property over family. Don't come crying to us when you need help or regret this decision. The ultimatum was meant to scare me into backing down. It didn't. If loving this place means I've chosen property over family, then you're right, that's my choice, I agreed. But I think what really happened is I chose honoring people who loved me unconditionally over people who love me conditionally. There's a difference. Victor grabbed his jacket roughly. You're going to regret this. When the taxes come due, when something breaks down, when you realize you're in over your head, remember we offered to help. Remember you threw it back in our faces. He headed for the door, Angela following without a word. Father picked up the unsigned contracts, crumpling them deliberately. Don't expect us at holidays. Don't expect phone calls or visits. You made your bed. You can lie in it alone. Mother gathered her things quietly. Her earlier tears dried up, replaced with cold disappointment. I thought we raised you better than this, she said softly, which hurt more than the shouting had. Sawyer hesitated at the door, looking back at me. For a second I thought he might say something, bridge the gap somehow. But Father called his name sharply, and he turned away, following them out into the night. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the valley. Engines started. Gravel crunched as they left one by one, taillights disappearing down the winding mountain road. I stood on the porch long after they'd gone, watching. The pull of blood ties is strong, even when those ties bind more than support. But then I looked at the cabin behind me. Solid logs my grandfather had helped raise. Windows Ruby had cleaned countless times, always leaving them spotless to let in maximum light. The porch where we'd shelled peas and shucked corn and talked about everything and nothing. This place held love in every board and stone. Real love, the kind that asks nothing but gives everything. Walking back inside felt like returning to safety. The fire had burned down to embers. I added logs and watched flames climb again, orange light pushing back the dark. The dinner table still held half-eaten food and abandoned wine glasses, evidence of the battlefield the meal had become. I cleaned up slowly, methodically, finding comfort in the familiar routine. Washing dishes in the deep farmhouse sink, putting away leftovers, wiping down surfaces. Each motion helped ground me back in my body, in this space, in the choice I'd made. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in the small bedroom under grandmother's quilt, staring at ceiling beams I'd helped repair 2 summers ago. Questions circled relentlessly. Had I done the right thing? Could I have handled it differently? Was protecting the property worth losing whatever remained of family? The doubts pressed in, whispering that maybe I was the unreasonable one. Maybe I should have compromised. Maybe 18 was too young to make such permanent decisions. But every time I started spiraling toward regret, I remembered Victor's entitled rage, father's ultimatums, mother's manipulation disguised as concern, the unsigned contracts they'd brought assuming cooperation. They hadn't come for dinner or reconciliation. They'd come to claim what they believed they deserved, regardless of legal reality or my grandparents' explicit wishes. That wasn't love. That was entitlement. Morning came slowly, fog thick in the valleys, like it always was in late autumn. I made coffee in grandmother's old percolator, the familiar sound and smell providing comfort. Standing on the porch with steam rising from my mug, looking out over land that stretched to the tree line and beyond, I felt something settle. Peace, maybe. Or resolution. I'd done what was necessary to protect something valuable. The cost was high loneliness, estrangement, judgment, but the alternative would have been worse. Watching this place get sold and developed, or turned into vacation rentals or divided into lots, would have destroyed something irreplaceable. That's when I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. My stomach dropped. Were they back? Had they regrouped overnight and returned for round 2? I set down my coffee and walked to the edge of the porch, heart pounding again. But the vehicle that appeared through the fog wasn't one of theirs. It was a moving truck, large and professional with a company logo on the side. Behind it came my parents' SUV and Victor's pickup. They pulled up in a line, parking deliberately to block the drive. Father got out first, that same confident expression from the previous evening back on his face. Victor followed, looking smug. Mother emerged more slowly, still playing the reluctant participant. They'd brought Sawyer again, probably for sympathy points. But the big shock came when strangers started climbing out of the truck movers in company uniforms with clipboards and gloves ready to work. "Morning, Autumn," Father called out, voice loaded with false cheerfulness. "Hope you slept well." We certainly did. He walked closer to the porch, Victor at his side. "We spent some time with our attorney last night after leaving here. Turns out, you're not as clever as you think." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Is that right?" Victor nodded, pulling out folded papers. "That trust you're so proud of? It has a flaw. You're a minor in the eyes of property transfer law in Tennessee when the assets involved exceed certain thresholds. The transfer requires parental consent for anyone under 19 when dealing with estates over $500,000. Your birthday being last week doesn't matter. The trust is invalid." He held up the documents triumphantly. We've got a court order here granting temporary custody of the property back to your father as next of kin pending a full legal review. That review could take months, but in the meantime, this place reverts to family control." He smiled coldly. "We're moving in today. You need to pack your things and leave." The movers stood ready, waiting for the signal to start unloading. Father crossed his arms. "We gave you a chance to do this the easy way. You chose confrontation, so now we do it legally. The house is ours, the land is ours, and you're officially trespassing if you don't leave voluntarily." Mother added her piece, softer but no less cutting. "This is what happens when children try to play adult games. You're not ready for this responsibility. Maybe now you'll understand we were trying to help." Sawyer hung back by the vehicles, looking uncomfortable, but not intervening. For a moment, genuine fear shot through me. Could they be right? Had I missed something in the legal structure? Was there some loophole that invalidated everything? The confidence in Victor's face, the official-looking documents, the moving truck, it all seemed too coordinated to be a bluff. But then I remembered Jonathan's words during our final meeting. "They'll likely challenge this. They'll bring threats and maybe even fake documents. Stay calm. The law is on your side." I took a breath and looked past them to the man emerging from the passenger side of the moving truck. He wasn't dressed like a mover. He wore a suit, carried a briefcase, and had the unmistakable bearing of someone official. My heart lifted. I'd called Jonathan last night after they left, updating him on everything said. He'd promised to handle any fallout, to be ready if they escalated. This had to be him or someone he sent. But then I noticed the sheriff's vehicle pulling up behind the trucks. Deputy Mitchell, who I'd met several times when he did wellness checks on my grandparents in their final years, stepped out. He knew this property and knew me. Relief flooded through me. Father noticed them too, and his confidence wavered slightly. "This doesn't concern law enforcement. It's a family property dispute being handled through proper channels." Victor added quickly, "We have documentation. Everything's legal." The man in the suit walked up to join Deputy Mitchell. "I'm Jonathan Rice, estate attorney for the Henderson Family Trust, and I'm afraid you've been misinformed about Tennessee property law." He looked at Victor's papers without touching them. "Those are fabricated. There's no such provision regarding age thresholds for irrevocable trusts in this state. The trust was filed properly, reviewed by county clerks, and registered officially 3 days ago. Any claims otherwise are fraudulent." Father's face went red. "That's not possible. Our attorney confirmed—" Jonathan cut him off. "I'd be curious to know which attorney you consulted, considering no legitimate legal professional would make such claims. The trust structure is standard and unassailable. Autumn Henderson is the sole trustee with complete authority over these assets." Deputy Mitchell stepped forward. "I'm going to need to see identification from everyone here. And those documents you're claiming are court orders? I'll need to verify those downtown. If they're forged, that's a serious crime. Fraud, attempted theft, possibly conspiracy." His tone was professionally neutral but firm. Victor's smugness evaporated. "Now wait a minute. We're family trying to resolve an internal matter. There's no need for criminal accusations." He shot a glare at me like this was somehow my fault for escalating. "You showed up with a moving truck and fraudulent legal documents attempting to seize property," Jonathan stated flatly. "That's not an internal matter. That's illegal regardless of family ties." He turned to me. "Autumn, do you want these individuals removed from the property?" The moment stretched out, or looking at my father's face going from confidence to fear. Victor's calculations showing around the edges of panic. Mother stepping back, distancing herself from the plan's collapse. Sawyer looking genuinely scared now, realizing they'd crossed legal lines. These were the people who raised me, who shared blood, who should have been safe harbor, and they'd just attempted to steal from me using fake legal papers and intimidation. "Yes," I said clearly. I want them removed, and I want documentation of everything said and threatened in case further action is needed. Father made one last attempt. Autumn, please. Don't do this. We're your parents. You're making a huge mistake. We can still work this out. The desperation in his voice might have moved me yesterday. But not after this. You brought movers and fake documents, I replied. You were going to throw me out of my own home based on lies. That's not family. That's criminal. Deputy Mitchell started taking information from everyone, calling in to verify the court order claims that would obviously come back as bogus. The movers were confused, realizing they'd been hired under false pretenses. They started packing up their equipment, wanting nothing to do with the situation. Jonathan pulled me aside while this unfolded. This escalation actually helps your case. I'll document everything and file for a restraining order if you want. Keep them off the property legally, prevent further harassment. I nodded numbly, still processing that they'd actually tried this. Within an hour, it was over. The fake documents were confirmed as fraudulent. Victor got cited for filing false claims and attempting to procure property through deception. Father and mother weren't charged, but were given official warnings. If they attempted contact or came on the property again without permission, they'd face trespassing charges. Sawyer got let off completely since he was clearly just brought along, but the deputy made sure he understood the seriousness. They left in a very different manner than their arrival. No confidence, no smugness, just quiet shame and anger as vehicles turned around and headed back down the mountain. The moving truck followed, driver shaking his head at the wasted morning. Deputy Mitchell stayed a while longer, making sure I was okay and explaining the protective order process if needed. Jonathan lingered after everyone else left. That was bold of them. Desperate, all but bold. I've seen family disputes turn ugly, but forging legal documents crosses a line most won't attempt. He reviewed paperwork with me, making sure I understood next steps and protections available. The trust is secure. No legitimate challenge can touch it. But I'd recommend changing locks, maybe installing security cameras, just in case emotions override sense again. After he left, silence returned to the property, but it felt different now. Not lonely, peaceful. The threat had materialized and been defeated. They'd shown their true nature completely, removing any lingering guilt about protecting what was mine. Standing on the porch again, coffee long cold but still in hand, I looked out over the morning mist burning off the valleys. My grandparents had known this might happen. They'd prepared me without explicitly warning, teaching through example how to stand firm and protect what mattered. The cabin felt more mine than ever. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd proven worthy of the trust placed in me. Lloyd and Ruby had bet everything that I'd be strong enough to weather family pressure, wise enough to see through manipulation, and resilient enough to stand alone if necessary. They'd been right. The weeks following were strange. Quiet in ways both peaceful and unsettling. No surprise visits, no pressure texts, no calls demanding reconciliation or apologies. Complete silence from everyone except one text from Sawyer a few days later. I'm sorry about everything. They didn't tell me the full plan. Hope you're okay. I didn't respond. Forgiveness felt premature, and I needed space to process without navigating his feelings too. So Jonathan finalized the restraining order without opposition. Father and Victor chose not to contest it, probably on advice from whatever lawyer they'd actually consulted after the fake document disaster. Mother called once from a blocked number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that I deleted without listening. Whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. The boundary was set. The line was drawn. Life developed new patterns. I enrolled in online courses at a community college, studying business management and property law, preparing to handle the inheritance responsibly. Mornings meant maintenance routines, checking gutters, stacking firewood, winterizing equipment. Afternoons brought coursework and planning. Evenings were quiet reading by the fire, cooking in grandmother's kitchen, finding comfort in solitude. Loneliness hit sometimes, usually during holidays or family-oriented occasions. Thanksgiving came and went with just me at the cabin, making a small turkey that lasted for days. Christmas felt hollow without any decorations or celebrations, though I did hang a wreath on the door more for the tradition than joy. But the ache of isolation was bearable, far better than the stress of dealing with people who saw me only as an obstacle to profit. Local neighbors proved surprising sources of connection. The Johnsons, who owned property 2 ridges over, stopped by to check on me after hearing through the small-town grapevine about family troubles. They didn't pry, just offered help if I needed it. Old Mr. Thatcher, who'd been friends with my grandfather for 40 years, came around to share stories and wisdom about mountain living. These weren't deep relationships yet, but they were genuine, free of agenda or expectation. Spring arrived with projects to tackle. The cabin needed exterior staining, several windows required resealing, and the root cellar door had rotted through. I hired contractors for bigger jobs I couldn't handle alone, carefully managing the modest funds the trust generated from my grandparents' investments. Every decision felt weighty, carrying responsibility for preserving their legacy properly. One afternoon in May, while I was on the porch painting window trim, a car I didn't recognize pulled up. My first instinct was worry another confrontation or legal issue. But the woman who stepped out was elderly, probably mid-70s, with kind eyes and weathered hands that spoke of hard work. "You must be Autumn," she said warmly. "I'm Dorothy Weaver. I knew your grandmother Ruby back when we were young women, before life scattered us to different parts of the state." She'd heard about Ruby's passing and wanted to visit the old place, see where her dear friend had spent so many happy years. We talked for hours. Dorothy shared stories I'd never heard about grandmother's youth, her strength, her wisdom, the choices she made that shaped her life. "Ruby always said you were special," Dorothy told me as the sun set. "She told me years ago that if anything happened to her and Lloyd, they were leaving everything to you. She said you had his backbone and her heart, that you'd protect what mattered, even when it was hard." Those words settled something in me that had remained unsettled. External validation from someone who knew them deeply, confirming I'd honored their choice correctly. Dorothy visited several more times that summer, becoming an unexpected bridge to my grandparents' past and a friend in the present. By autumn, a full year after everything had blown up, I felt solidly rooted. The cabin had become truly mine, not through inheritance papers, but through the work and decisions and solitude that shaped both it and me. I'd weathered winter alone, managed crises when pipes froze and the generator failed, celebrated small victories when repairs held and gardens thrived. The trust account remained stable. Property taxes got paid. Maintenance continued. I'd proven Jonathan right I could handle this. One evening, sitting where grandfather used to sit in his worn armchair by the fire, I realized something profound. I wasn't lonely anymore. Alone, yes, but loneliness implies something missing, something needed but absent. I had everything required for contentment: this place, this purpose, this peace. The family I'd lost hadn't actually provided those things. They'd provided obligation, stress, inequity, conditional regard. What I'd built in their absence was healthier, even if smaller. That realization didn't mean I stopped missing certain things. I missed having someone to share accomplishments with, someone who'd care that I'd fixed the fence line or canned vegetables from the garden. I missed the idea of family, the theoretical support system that mine had never actually been. But I didn't miss them specifically. The people who'd shown up with moving trucks and fake papers, who'd threatened and manipulated and saw me only as an obstacle, those people weren't missed. Sawyer reached out again as his high school graduation approached. A longer message this time, more thoughtful. He apologized specifically for not standing up during the confrontations, for going along with plans he didn't understand. He said he'd had time to think about everything, about how differently we'd been treated growing up, how unfair things had been. He didn't ask to visit or push for reconciliation, just wanted me to know he'd gained perspective. I responded briefly, "I appreciate you saying that. I hope you build a good life for yourself, separate from their patterns. Take care, Sawyer." That felt right measured, acknowledging growth without reopening doors that needed to stay closed. 2 years after that confrontation at the cabin, I stood on the same porch watching sunrise paint the ridges gold and orange. 20 years old now, more confident, more capable. The property thrived under careful stewardship. I'd added solar panels to reduce reliance on generators, expanded the garden to include fruit trees and berry bushes, learned carpentry skills beyond basic repairs, building a proper workshop in one of the outbuildings. The cabin had become not just a home, but a living memorial to Lloyd and Ruby, maintained with the same care and wisdom they'd demonstrated their entire lives. My online studies had progressed into a full-degree program in environmental conservation. It felt fitting, honoring their love of this land by learning how to protect places like it. I'd started documenting the property's history and ecology, creating a comprehensive record for future generations. Maybe someday, I'd pass this place to someone else, someone who'd value it beyond dollar signs. But that was distant thinking. For now, stewardship was enough. The local community had embraced me fully. I volunteered with the volunteer fire department, helped with trail maintenance in the national park, participated in town meetings about development and conservation. People knew my name, my story, my connection to the Henderson family history. Respect came from actions, not bloodlines. No contact had come from my parents or Victor in over a year. Complete silence, which I counted as blessing more than loss. They'd made their choice to value money over relationship, to burn bridges in pursuit of profit. I'd simply stood on the other side and let those bridges fall. No regret remained, only clarity. Sawyer sent a graduation announcement. He'd gotten into State University on a partial scholarship, playing football, but also focusing on academics for the first time. The note inside was brief but genuine. "Thank you for the example you set. Even if I didn't appreciate it then, learning to stand on my own, hope you're well." Progress, I supposed. Maybe someday we'd rebuild some form of relationship, but it would have to be between us alone, separate from family toxicity. One lesson crystallized above all others through this experience. Family is supposed to be a source of support and love. But when it becomes a source of pressure and harm, protecting yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. Too many people sacrifice their well-being, their boundaries, their very selves, to maintain connections with people who treat them poorly, simply because of blood relation. But biology doesn't entitle anyone to your trust or resources or peace of mind. My grandparents understood this. They'd watched their own son prioritize material comfort over responsibility, seen their brother chase schemes instead of stability. They'd loved these men, but hadn't trusted them with their legacy. That distinction, love without trust, family without faith, was powerful and necessary. They'd chosen me not because I was perfect, but because I demonstrated values worth trusting. Integrity, responsibility, respect for what others built. The hardest part wasn't cutting ties or standing firm. It was accepting that doing so was necessary. That moment of recognition when you realize people you should be able to trust are actively working against your best interests, that hurts in ways few other things can. It requires grieving a relationship while the people involved still live, mourning what should have been while dealing with what actually is. But on the other side of that grief comes freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from inequity. Freedom to build life on your own terms according to your own values. I wouldn't wish this path on anyone, but having walked it, I wouldn't trade the outcome. This cabin, This land, this peace, they're mine, not just legally, but authentically. Earned through choices that cost dearly, but paid back in ways money never could. Standing there at sunrise, coffee steaming in the morning chill, I thought about Lloyd and Ruby, about the faith they'd placed in a teenage girl who was overwhelmed and uncertain, about the wisdom it took to look past their own son and brother to see who truly deserved their trust. I'd proven them right, but more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I could handle whatever came. Loneliness, confrontation, legal battles, isolation, all of it had been survivable. More than survivable. Transformative. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and approaching autumn. Another season turning, another year of stewardship ahead. Roof repairs planned for early fall. Firewood to stack before winter. Projects and plans and purposes that filled days with meaning. This was the life my grandparents had wanted for someone who'd value it. This was the legacy they'd protected. And I'd ensured it would continue long after I eventually passed it to someone equally worthy. If there's anything this story teaches, it's this. Protecting what matters sometimes means disappointing people. Setting boundaries sometimes means losing relationships. Standing firm sometimes means standing alone. But those costs, as high as they are worth paying when the alternative is losing yourself or betraying the trust of people who truly loved you. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by behavior, by support, by genuine care that flows both ways. My grandparents were family. The Johnsons checking on me during storms, Mr. Thatcher sharing wisdom, Dorothy Weaver connecting me to history. These people became family. The ones who shared my DNA but not my values, they were relatives. And there's a profound difference. So if you're facing something similar, if you're being pressured to compromise what you know is right to keep peace with people who don't respect you, hear this. You're not selfish for protecting yourself. You're not wrong for setting boundaries. You're not betraying anyone by refusing to be betrayed. The guilt they heap on you, the accusations of ingratitude or cruelty or selfishness, those are tools of manipulation, not truth. Trust your instincts. Honor people who honored you. Stand firm even when it hurts. And know that on the other side of that pain is the possibility of peace, not the hollow peace of giving in, but the deep peace of knowing you did right by people who deserved it, and by yourself who deserved better. The sun cleared the ridges fully, flooding the valley with light. Another day beginning. Another day living the life my grandparents worked their entire lives to make possible. I raised my coffee mug to them, to their memory, to their faith. Thank you, I whispered into the morning, for seeing me, for trusting me, for teaching me what really matters. And the mountain, ancient and patient, seemed to whisper back through wind in the pines. You earned this. You're worthy. You're home. That was enough. That was everything.